The moment I saw her trembling fingers grip the edge of the picnic table, I knew something was wrong. The bright midday sun poured across the crowded outdoor festival, making everything look alive and cheerful, yet she stood frozen as if trapped in a world that was slowly collapsing inside her. Her eyes darted to a man standing a short distance away, a man who looked far too calm for the intensity with which he watched her. She stepped toward me, her voice barely above a whisper, telling me something so strange and unexpected that it pulled the ground from under my feet. She said she needed me to dance with her, right there in the middle of the festival grounds, in broad daylight where everyone could see. She told me someone was watching, and she needed to look like she wasn't afraid. Then she offered a reward, a kiss spoken in a rushed, shaky confidence. And I told her something that made her freeze, that her reward was too small for the danger she was facing. I didn't know who she was, or what kind of trouble she carried, but I knew she needed help. I knew she needed someone to stand between her and whatever darkness she was trying so desperately to escape. Before we go deeper into this story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of standing up for someone who can't stand alone, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindly Tube. Your support truly helps stories like this reach more hearts. Her name, I would later learn, was Marin Solis, a name that sounded soft and bright, completely opposite of the turmoil she lived in. But at that moment, she was just a trembling stranger asking me to pretend that we knew each other. I was Rowan Hale, a woodworker who had come to the annual spring fair mostly out of boredom and the hope of sunshine. As she took my hand and I felt how cold her skin was despite the warm daytime air, I realized she wasn't asking for a dance. She was asking for protection. We stepped into the space between the vendor stalls where live music flowed from the small stage. People around us swayed and laughed, families shared snacks, children ran with balloons. It felt wrong that someone so afraid had found her way into such a peaceful scene. As I placed my hand gently against her back, pretending to lead her into a slow dance, I could feel her heartbeat punching through her ribs. She kept her face angled toward mine, but her eyes flickered past me again and again toward that man. She tried to smile, even tried to make it look like she had come to enjoy the afternoon, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. It took only a few seconds for me to understand that this wasn't a lover's argument or an awkward misunderstanding. This was someone running from something or someone. Her breathing eased only slightly as we moved. She wasn't graceful, but she followed my steps like she was clinging to them, as if losing rhythm for even a second might put her in danger. Her fingers dug into my shoulder every time she saw movement from the man watching her. I could feel the weight of her desperation, the silent plea hidden behind her shaky smile. When she leaned closer and whispered that the man was her ex-fiancé, a man she had left after months of quiet fear and emotional bruising, my stomach tightened. She said he had found her after almost a year of quiet living, showing up today without warning, pretending to casually stroll past her booth even though he never once took his eyes off her. She was working at the fair helping her aunt sell handmade soaps. She never expected him to show up in broad daylight. It was then that she told me the strangest part, that she believed he was waiting for the moment she would step aside, walk alone, or look vulnerable. She had noticed it before, months ago, when she finally tried to move on from him. He always hovered, appearing where he shouldn't be, staying just far enough away to avoid confrontation but close enough for her to feel trapped. She had left him because she wanted a life where she could laugh without looking over her shoulder. But here he was, quietly slicing through her newfound peace. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't someone who fought battles or chased villains. I was just a simple man with a simple life, a man who carved chairs and tables out of old wood and tried to keep my world calm and steady. Yet in that moment, holding a stranger who was praying for a shield, I realized that sometimes life chooses you for a moment you didn't prepare for. Sometimes someone else's story collides with yours, asking you to be braver than you've ever been. As we continued our slow dance, her breathing began to steady. She asked quietly why I said her reward, a kiss, was too small. I told her that safety, peace, and freedom were things far greater than a token gesture. I said that if she wanted my help, she didn't owe me anything. I wasn't here for a reward. I was here because she looked like someone who had run out of corners to hide in. The music changed, but we stayed in step, almost blending into the crowd of festival goers. Eventually, she dared to look away from me long enough to search for the man again. This time, her breath hitched with surprise. He had moved closer. Not dangerously close, but close enough that she stiffened. I could feel her fear spike through her entire body. Instead of letting her retreat into panic, I gently guided her toward her aunt's booth, staying by her side, keeping her close so she wouldn't feel alone. Her aunt, an older woman named Sarah, looked up with immediate understanding in her eyes. She had the same warm brown irises as Marin but carried a wiser, heavier look. She quietly mouthed that he was back. I realized then that this wasn't the first time they had dealt with him. Sarah touched Marin's arm with a calming hand, telling her to stay near, not to wander. I stood beside them, pretending to look over the soaps and oils while keeping my eyes alert. For the next hour, Marin stayed within arm's reach of her aunt or me. The man wandered the fairgrounds, always lingering, never approaching, circling the booths like a slow-moving shadow. Every once in a while, his eyes settled on Marin, and I could see her shrink. It became painfully clear that she had lived too long under the weight of his quiet intimidation. She said he was the kind of man who rarely raised his voice, but controlled everything through silence, guilt, and fear. That kind of manipulation leaves deeper wounds than any shouting ever could. I didn't want to escalate things, but I also didn't want to let her walk home alone after the festival. When her aunt began packing up the last of the soaps as the afternoon sun hung lower, I offered to walk them to their car. At first, Marin hesitated. She didn't want to drag a stranger into her mess, but her aunt insisted gently. As we walked through the bustling parking area, I noticed the man watching from far behind us. I made sure to position myself between him and the two women. The bright daylight made everything look normal, but the fear that moved with us was very real. When Sarah got into the driver's seat and Marin climbed inside, the man finally stepped forward, his pace slow and deliberate. I could feel tension rising like a storm. I stepped slightly in front of the car door, not threateningly, but firmly. He paused just a few feet away, his eyes darting between Marin and me. I kept my tone even and calm, telling him she didn't want to talk and that he needed to give her space. Something shifted in his expression, a realization that he wasn't in control here, not today. He gave a tight, forced smile, turned away, and walked back toward the fairgrounds. When the car drove off and I was left alone in the parking lot, I felt strangely empty, as if I had been holding tension in my body that only now began to release. I didn't expect to see her again, but the next morning, as I opened my workshop for the day, I found her standing outside with 2 cups of coffee. She looked different, still tired, but lighter. She said she wanted to thank me properly, not with a reward, but with gratitude. She said she slept for the first time in weeks. We talked for a long time in the workshop's open doorway, with the sunshine drifting in and the smell of fresh sawdust filling the air. She told me about the last year of her life, about rebuilding herself piece by piece, about learning that strength didn't always look fierce, it often looked quiet, steady, and persistent. She apologized for dragging me into her fear, and I told her she didn't drag me, she simply reached out, and I happened to be close enough to take her hand. Over the next few weeks, she visited often. Not because she needed protection, but because she said being near someone calm helped her reclaim parts of herself she thought she had lost forever. We grew closer in the gentle, slow way that feels safe and honest. She would sit in my workshop while I carved, telling me stories of her childhood, her dreams, the small victories she achieved after leaving her old life behind. And I found myself wanting to be part of the life she was building, not the one she escaped. One bright afternoon, she laughed, a real, warm laugh, and said that the day she met me, she offered a kiss because she was desperate. But now, after knowing me, she felt that offering something so small would never match what my presence had given her. I told her that the best things weren't rewards at all, but moments shared between two people learning to trust again. As she grew stronger, she stopped looking over her shoulder. She began working on her own small business, designing aromatherapy oils and natural perfumes inspired by calmness and healing. I helped her set up shelves, tables, and wooden racks for her new shop. Each step forward seemed to prove that she was no longer living in fear. Months later, on a warm, peaceful day, she gently took my hand and reminded